I could feel the air running out of my lungs and thinking, if I can't catch another breath, I'm going to die. If they've got a knife, I'm going to die. And for, I'd say, a good 10 years after the event, that's how I would describe it to people. Um, but then I also at the same time had this experience where it felt like I'd say about 20 feet up in the air. After 25 years I had a monthly chiropractic appointment for 25 years. I was paralyzed and rushed to the hospital on several occasions for movie sets. And now my back is strong. The IBS, the allergies, the asthma, my tension in my neck, all gone.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we have Chana Studley with us. She has had an out of body type of experience. We're going to talk to her about that. She's also had a life of healing chronic illness. So I'm really excited to just dig in and find out more about you, Chana. So thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm really excited to be here with you. Thank you.
I kind of start all my episodes the same way. And I, at this point, don't know when you had the chronic illnesses or the experiences yet, but I usually try to go back quite a bit. And I start with your childhood because sometimes in childhood, we have a different perspective of what the perspective we have in our adult life, right?
Yeah.
So I try to get a little bit about who you were, maybe in your teen years. I don't know when the chronic illnesses kind of started, but if we can go back before any of that began, before any of the changes in your life, and I just want to know a little bit about yourself growing up.
Yeah, thank you. I grew up in the UK, in England, and I, looking back, I can see now I was a pretty nervous kid. I was very self-conscious. I'm tall and skinny, so I felt geeky and awkward and felt like I never fit in. Although, I mean, most kids and teenagers feel that way. But it was the early 70s, so I was a punk rocker. The real thing, not just the blue hair version. We were living in squats and everybody was in a band and I had dreadlocks and a Mohican and we were, you know, in Trafalgar Square in London campaigning for, free Nelson Mandela and the miners were on strike and against Mrs. Thatcher. So it was very political and very,
Hmm.
very activist back in the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah, so that's how I grew up.
Wow. And did that go into so if it was political, did that influence the direction in your career path?
Um, Yes and no, in that I've never had a proper job in my life.
Hmm.
I've worked very hard. I went to college and studied textiles in Manchester University, which is where one of the first episodes of trauma happened. Second two actually there, and but I actually had an Academy Award winning career in Hollywood. So I went from after college, I did first of all commercials, then TV, then movies and ended up in California for 16 years.
Wow.
So I've always had a very unconventional work life,
Hmm.
which kind of came from that kind of punk rock rebellious beginning. Yeah.
So you jumped around doing different things, but it seems like because you said you were kind of a shy type kid growing up. You said tall and skinny. I was shorter and stocky, so we're two opposites. But so you grew up and obviously you went through some traumas and we're gonna dig into that. But I guess one of the reasons I dig into childhood first, right, is did you experience any traumas growing up that were similar to the ones that started in was it your 20s or so or adulthood that things started to kind of happen?
Not specific traumas in my childhood, no. I mean, it wasn't an easy childhood, but I wouldn't call it traumatic. It was just very strict, very, very
Okay.
strict. So there wasn't a lot of, loving and affection. It was, quite a distant, cold, very English
Hmm.
upbringing. And so I think when the traumas did happen in my 20s, I certainly didn't turn to my family for support.
Was
Yeah.
there religion or spiritual aspect involved in your childhood or teen years?
Some, yeah. I mean, we disagreed about most things actually. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
You disagreed with your parents or you disagreed
Oh,
with
totally. Yeah, totally. We were
Interesting.
complete opposites. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. All right. So let's lead into when things began then. So you said that the first instance was you said you were working somewhere.
I
Sorry.
was actually when I was in college. So the first one,
Mhm.
I was still a student. And like I said, we were all punks and into music and going to gigs, and that was kind of our lifestyle. College kind of got in the way of that. Um, that was our main focus. And I had a boyfriend at the time who had just come back from a tour of Scandinavia. His band had been away, and so we all piled down to see them in like their kind of homecoming concert in a club in Manchester. And so it was dark. Everybody's dancing. The lights are just on the stage, and a guy who I never knew who he was. He came and started dancing with me and putting his hands where he shouldn't. And I kind of, turned to back off. And he pushed me. And the last thing I remember is his hand on the back of my head, and he smashed my head into a concrete pillar on the side of the dance floor. So he fractured my skull. I can put my finger on it right here. I know you can't see, like there's nothing to see, but I can feel like exactly where the fracture was. And I was I probably only lost consciousness for a minute tops. But when I came to, I was on the floor and I couldn't see. I could only see about an inch in front of my face because I learned later that because of the impact, the skull rebounded on my brain. And so the visual processing part of your brain is at the back. So it
Hmm.
kind of rebounded on the back of my skull and bruised that part of my brain. So that's why I couldn't see. And and my head was a different shape. That was the scariest part. I couldn't see, and my head's a different shape. And I crawled on my hands and knees through the crowd to a friend who I knew was mixing the sound at the back of the room. And as soon as he saw me, he kind of jumped across the bar, got a bucket of ice, put it in a towel, put it on my head, and threw me in a taxi and got me to the hospital. So but that one I recovered from pretty quickly because it was we're students, we're punks, people get hurt. It was
Yeah.
because I was called Melonhead for a while, so my head was swollen. I got a week off college, and so kind of got on with it. Yeah,
Wow.
no, nobody even called it a sexual assault at the time. It was just like, one of those things that happened.
That's unbelievable. So you were quite young when that happened, though. And
Yes, like 20. Yeah.
yeah, did it affect you from a social standpoint at all after that, or did you just kind of continue on your way?
No, because I was actually mugged 3 times. That was the first one.
Oh
Like
my
once is bad
goodness.
enough, but it actually was three. They get worse. So 3 years later, so yeah, after that one, it was, I went back to college. I took a year off of school. Officially took a year off at the end of that year, but it was more for the music and the lifestyle. I never went back, so I didn't actually finish my college degree, but it didn't seem to, in the entertainment business, it didn't seem to matter. Um, and then about 3 years later, I was walking near where I'd been living for the last few years, and it was only 6 o'clock in the evening, and uh, I'd just moved house, so I was just going back to pick up the last few things from a friend, a neighbor, and 3 men came from out of the dark, ran up behind me, slammed me on the ground, and beat the living daylights out of me. And this is really where I had the out of body experience because I
Wow.
really thought I was going to die. Um, they like two of them held me down, and the other one was kicking and punching me in the head and my stomach and chest. And I guess they were looking for money, and I didn't have any on me. So and I was screaming for my life. And I can remember thinking, I could feel the air running out of my lungs and thinking, if I can't catch another breath, I'm going to die. If they've got a knife, I'm going to die. And for, I'd say, a good 10 years after the event, that's how I would describe it to people. Um, but then I also at the same time had this experience where it felt like I'd say about 20 feet up in the air, looking down, and I could see them beating me, almost like a cat in a tree, like, looking at something it doesn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could hear myself screaming. I could feel the air running out of my lungs, but I'm also like 20 feet up looking down, watching this. And then, let's say this happened in the early 80s. So, and then it's kind of shifted about 10 years afterwards. And I started remembering that that sensation of hearing myself scream was coming from deep inside of me. And it felt like you know, like a beach ball, like a blow up beach ball, like a rubber ball.
Hmm.
Imagine like the innermost place of a beach ball. You're surrounded by air, and then there's the skin of the ball. I kind of felt like that, like I was so deep inside of me that they couldn't touch me. Like almost like a tree being blown around in the wind. Like I could
Hmm.
feel them knocking my body and beating. And like I mean, my ears got really mashed up. Luckily, I didn't have any earrings in at the time because they were bleeding and cut and broken ribs and all that kind of stuff. They were. I could feel them pounding on the body, but I was kind of safe inside. So I thought, well, maybe the other version of the story was just what I imagined. And now looking back, I think they're all true, in some kind of weird, spooky, spiritual way.
Hmm.
I was deep inside. I was out here. I was feeling the violent clashes, and I could hear them, and I could hear myself screaming. It was like when you're in that kind of situation, things slow down, speed up. It's like time's a concept, so it kind of didn't really apply in that, and it probably only lasted for what, a minute and a half, two
Hmm.
minutes max. But the pain and suffering probably lasted for about 10 or 15 years afterwards, I'd say.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. That's I can see. I think you said at one point, and we can talk later on about it, but I believe you work with people in trauma at this point in
Mhm.
your life. I can see why you would go that road dealing with something
Right.
like that. You
Mhm.
speaking on the so that definitely is an out about experience. In fact, I've spoke with a number of on my channel, I've spoke with a number of people who've had whether it's abuse or it's generally for some reason I get often with women um unfortunately sexual abuse type scenarios where in the abusive moment they step out of their body. They
Mhm.
basically say, "Oh, I don't want to be in this right now, and I'm just gonna step out while this happens." I've had some report that they go further
Mhm.
and then they come back. Some people it's just a matter of being there while that's happening, and then they kind of find themselves back in their body. And it's
Mhm.
it's questionable. I mean, and then like I've said to you before, we have people who've literally crossed and come back and have
Yeah.
similar experiences that go even beyond, right?
Mhm.
When you were in that experience, did you recall still feeling the pain?
No,
Right.
no, I didn't feel pain any of the time. It was more panic. It was, and it's weird now. I think like it sounds like a contradiction because in one level I was panicked that I couldn't catch another breath to carry on screaming because somehow I had this idea if I kept screaming I was going to be saved or someone would come and help or they would
Hmm.
stop. But at the same time having this feeling, the deep down inside feeling where I actually felt, I don't know if safe's the right word, but like I was protected from them. Like no matter what they did to me, I was going to be okay. But I didn't get in touch with that for a few years afterwards. It's kind of a weird thing to describe.
Yeah, no, I understand. Another question I've always wanted to ask is during, and I know that some of this is probably hard to think back, but depending on, I'm sure you've done healing around it, but thinking back to when it was happening, if you were looking at your body, was your body animated in struggle? Like, could you actually see the struggle of your body, or did it seem almost like a doll being attacked? That's the only way I can.
Yeah, I've never thought about that before, but yeah, it was more like a doll being attacked. It wasn't because I know I was fighting them back because I had, marks on my hands, from trying
Hmm.
to struggle. But um, but yeah, when I was looking down, I was kind of lifeless.
Yeah, that's where I'm heading with that. Because what I'm
Yeah,
trying to see is if there was a separation at any point, right?
yeah,
From what we truly are, right? And I think our animated bodies, yes, there are probably neurological things that happen in our bodies to twitch and
hmm,
it's like that old concept you cut a chicken's head off and it can still run around for a while.
yeah,
But I think
right.
there's things that happen. But I think
Hmm,
that once I think there's an essence of who we are that when we're not in there, we're not animating in the same way that we are here and communicating, as some
yeah,
say the eyes are you look into someone's eyes for their soul, you're kind of looking into their soul. So if someone's kind of gone in that moment, and it's horrible even for me to even picture that happening to anybody. So, but I was trying to dig into the fact that were you actually there or had you stepped to me it sounds like you did a bit of a step out for a moment to not go through the suffering. I just spoke with someone recently who had three horrific accidents. Two of them were car accidents, and in both of those accidents. In fact, one of them, she completely left the body and watched the accident from above. She wasn't in the body. She just she jumped out, watched the body go through its painful accident, but didn't feel a thing because she was witnessing it from a different realm.
Yeah.
And you hear that so many times. People will maybe say this is a trauma response. I actually have a background in social work, and I was going to really get into that. I feel a little sensitive for it these days, but I do work with people in coaching and things, so I deal with some things when I talk to people. What did you do after that? So immediately after this happened, did someone come to your aid? Did you get up on your own, or what happened?
Yeah, that was kind of interesting because when they ran off and when I kind of picked myself up, I saw at least two people walking by on the other side of the street. I mean, it was kind of like an area, a green area between two like housing complexes. But I can remember it because it was February and it was only 6 in the evening, but in Manchester in February it's already dark. And I can still picture a man in a raincoat underneath the light of a street lamp walking away from me. And I think that kind of compounded the feeling of isolation and helplessness. And I actually never had any resentment or anger towards those people because I had a friend actually not long after that who went to aid somebody who was being attacked and ended up being hurt badly himself. So
Mhm.
I actually don't, it's not I don't blame them, but for me it kind of compounded the hopelessness, the kind of isolation part of it. And then what kind of happened was I went back to a friend that I was visiting that night, and he kind of cleaned me up and um cups of tea, very English, didn't even go to the emergency room.
Right.
Cleaned me up, cups of tea, put me in a taxi, sent me home. And so I just kind of stayed in bed for a couple of days because I knew for broken ribs or whatever that there's nothing they can do, and I didn't think I needed medical attention that badly. And so after about 2 days, I like needed some, food, bread, milk, something. And I distinctly remember going towards the front door, and this loud voice came in my head, and it said, "Last time you went outside, they almost killed you." And this is what started about, well, I'd say the first year of intense struggle with my thinking.
Mm.
Because, and I think I kind of pushed through and went and got a pint of milk or something, but I was absolutely terrified. Just anybody came near me, any kind of sound, I was so jumpy, like hypervigilance was like my constant companion for the next year. Um, and every time I went to the front door for the first couple of weeks, it was like, you know, 3 days ago, you went outside and they almost killed you. 2 weeks ago, you almost died. This was like a constant like record going off in my head.
Mm.
And I actually did go to the police station because I wanted them to know what had happened. And I remember sitting across the table from a detective who was taking my evidence. And he didn't even look up at me. He just said, "Oh, well, we know who did it." And I'm like, "What?"
Wow.
He said, "Yeah, these guys have been going around attacking women a lot lately." I mean, if I hadn't, I wanted to reach across the table and strangle the guy. If I would have
Right.
arrested for attacking a policeman. But he couldn't care less, and he was just like, "Eh, whatever." He was just filling out the paperwork because
Wow.
it wasn't the nicest of areas, and from his point of view, they had more important things to deal with, like robberies and murders and drugs and stuff. So it was like, "Thanks for the information." I said, and I remember saying to him, "Why don't you put up a note in the laundromat or just let women know not to walk around on their own?" He's like, "Yeah." That was his answer.
Wow.
So that also, I think, compounded the feeling of I didn't count, I wasn't worth anything, wasn't worth bothering with, that my situation didn't matter to anybody. My personal friends were amazing the first few weeks. They took care of me and they came to visit, but then they moved on with the other stuff, life, and I was kind of stuck with this constant thought, like reliving what happened, the voice is saying that was it my fault, did I do something wrong, no, I didn't. And it was constant debates, and I ended up not sleeping properly, not eating properly, and they probably would call it self-harm today. I would punch the wall in absolute anger and frustration,
Mm.
and then I would hide my hands because I didn't want anybody to see that my hands were, I mean, on the few occasions I got out of the house, I didn't want people to see that my hands were bruised because how would I explain that? So
Yeah. So you're going through this trauma. I do have a question. You're going through this trauma. Obviously, this is hitting now, right? Because this incident happened. Did you ever? I don't think you would have because it sounds like you were so you had so much trauma com like piling up. But did you ever question what that experience was? Like why you were able to view yourself from a different angle that you were normally used to? Did that ever come across your mind at that time?
no, because at that time, I mean, the interesting thing though was I this is actually when I started training as a counselor. I trained with Manchester Rape Crisis Centre. And just to let you know, there were only two centres in the whole country at that time. There was one in London and one in Manchester. And I volunteered. I think it was before these things happened, because it's like a long time ago now. So I can't really remember the, the
Mm.
order of these things happening at that year or so. I think I trained before that because I was still a student. So I trained to answer the hotline, to go and talk to women in community centres, to educate, policemen and lawyers, social workers, people like that. And, because back in the 80s, it was not really talked about and it was a very unknown topic. Um, and I worked as an advocate a few times, going to courtrooms with women who'd been attacked, so they had support. So I think that's kind of why I didn't seek help myself, because I think I was, when you work in, or even if it's as a volunteer, I should know how to handle this. I think it was kind of like my pride kind of conspired with my um, the stories in my head to say, just don't tell anyone what's going on. So I didn't really discuss it with anyone until after the third one, which happened in London a couple of years later.
Okay, so during that time, you hadn't really thought about it and contemplated it. You're just kind of going because the probably the life trauma itself overshadowed any other experiences you were having. It seemed to
Yeah.
overtake you, as you know, with people dealing with severe trauma. It completely takes over your life. So were you in the UK at that time when that happened?
Yeah.
This whole time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They're all,
Okay. Because you had mentioned that at one point you worked for, I think you said 16 years in the US in
yeah,
the
that came
entertainment
later.
industry. Yeah.
Yeah, came
Okay.
later.
Okay. So when did this next one happen? The last one?
So about a year after the one I just described with the three guys, I I decided that Manchester was clearly the problem, and I should move down to London. My intention always was to kind of start working in the theatre, and so I moved down to London and I started working doing props and costumes, in local theatre projects. And I was riding my bike home from the theatre one night about 10 p.m. in living in central London. And I remember at the corner of my eye, I saw a young kid. He was about 16 and he was on a very small child's bicycle. And that's what got my attention, because I thought, why is he on like a 5-year-old's bike?
Mm.
16-year-old kid. And the next thing I knew, he was off the bike and he swung it and like threw it at me, basically. So I was riding my bike fast home this way, and the bike came like that, and it hit me in the neck and shoulders. It was like bam. It was like being shot out of a cannon at a brick wall, because like you're forward motion this way, and then you suddenly stopped by a chunk of metal coming at you,
Yeah.
and so he actually broke my neck. Thank God, not the spinal cord, or else I'd be in a wheelchair now. But the vertebrae underneath the skull, C2, C1 and C2, I think it was, yeah, they were cracked through. So he knocked me off my bike, took my mountain bike from underneath me and sold it for 50 quid, which is about, I don't know, $40 or something like that. So he almost killed me for $40. And
Wow.
so I'm lying in the gutter of a main busy London road, and there's cars whizzing past my head. So amazing how one of them didn't run me over. And I can remember like grit and everything's in in my mouth, and I'm thinking, why me? Why do all these things keep
Right.
happening to me? I couldn't understand it.
Wow.
And I picked myself up and went back to with some friends who lived nearby. And then I eventually went home that night also. I didn't know my neck was broken until another 2 years later. But the kid who did it, he went to school the next day bragging about it. And my friends who I'd gone to, their daughter heard him bragging. And he then came and tried to set their trash cans on fire. So, because we knew who he was.
Mm.
And then he got picked up for stealing cars. So he did go to jail. So I don't know his name. I wasn't called up for any kind of evidence, but I did hear that he went to jail. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So after that one,
Hmm.
I was really messed up because I knew that you shouldn't leave your house.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I can see why you came to that conclusion.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you'd come to me and said, "Oh, let's go for a walk in the park or let's go do a painting class," I'm like, "No, no, 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 no." If I knew it wasn't like I was absolutely convinced that if I went anywhere, something bad was going to happen. Like, if a bus was going to go out of control in central London and it was going to run somebody over, it would be me. Like some kind
Right.
of Murphy's Law kind of thing.
Hmm.
If I went down into the tube station and someone accidentally fell in front of the train, it would be me.
So you just kept finding yourself in that type of situation. I mean, it changed over time. And actually, this really brings up a really good point that I've had a few discussions with a
Mhm.
few other guests. And I've had discussions around, life and how we have our life plans. Okay. So we get really deep on the soul inspired and talk to people who've had pre-life memories of planning the traumas, the incidences they're going to go through within their life, how many children they're going to have, all these types of things. And when they're describing it and they can recall it over on this before birth, they have this excitement about it. And we're talking excitement around trauma, around really horrific things, because they're seeing it as a learning experience. And then when they're in the body, when they're embodied and they're having the experience, this is just again coming from guests that I've spoke with, not a personal experience. They, of course, go through it and they feel it and they have to heal through it and they have to go through all these things. And they go, why did I do that? Because then they have their NDE. This is how this happens. Usually they have their NDE and then they recall it. They have it in the memory comes back. And they come back and they're just going, why would I do that to myself? It's almost like a self-harm. But the learning around it is that sometimes they're patterns as well. And so sometimes we get into these patterns. And I'm not saying, excuse me, that you had trauma continuing because of patterns, but maybe I don't know, when you're working with people, if you see things people go through and they just keep getting those repeated things happening, and then they say, why me? Why is this happening? And if there's kind of things that we can do in our life to break the pattern that's causing it. I'm not saying that we are causing it all the time, but we also don't want to be victim. So there's kind of like this balance in between, right? I guess the reason I bring it up is because here's this third one. You said then you started maybe questioning things because you mentioned that you started questioning, this moment that you had at some point. When was it that you started healing through this and did some of the traumas start to calm down, or did you continue going through this through your life cycle?
That was, thank God, the last one in terms of injuries.
Mhm.
But um, my understanding of it has morphed and changed over the years. Because, like I said, I went down pretty hard after that next one because I had evidence. I had police reports and X-rays to prove, that the world's a scary place.
Mm.
And just getting out of my bedroom, was becoming a challenge, not let alone out of the house. And then I finally asked for help. Like I said, it took me a long time to ask for help, and I think it's because I had this idea that, I should know better. I should be able to handle this. And I reached out to a women's crisis center. And I can remember one of the mentors there, she said to me, she said, "Are you ready to let go of your story?"
Mm.
And I was so offended, right? Because what I heard her say was not quite what she actually said, right? So she said, "Was I ready to let go of my story?" Because I'd become the girl who was mugged 3 times, right? And it really became part of my identity. I could get it into any conversation. I could, um, yeah, I could really have you in tears about it. And what I heard her say was, it didn't happen, it didn't hurt, and get over it.
Mm.
That's kind of how I processed it, right? And I remember in my head when she said that, I was screaming, it did happen, it did hurt, and I can't get over it. And I probably spent the next 20 years doing a lot of what many of us do, like general self-help type work. I did a lot, like I mentioned, I ended up, I mean, she did help me get more out, and I started working in the theater again, and then I started doing commercials, and I ended up working on film. And I ended up, I did special effects in movies for many years. I worked for Jim Henson's Creature Shop.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, the Muppets are done in New York, but we did special effects for other people's movies. So the first movie I
Amazing.
did was the first Flintstones movie with John Goodman as a
Oh,
Fred
I love
Flintstone.
that. It's one of my favorite movies. That's
Really?
hilarious.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I
there you
made
go.
the Dick the Bird and the all the birds in the movie. I built them in London. I mean, I say it takes a whole team of people to do these things. And so I was sent out to California to supervise all the filming of that movie. So I was on set with Steven Spielberg and Elizabeth Taylor and you know, and
Wow.
so then I thought, this is amazing because I had gone from this place where I couldn't get out the door to suddenly and I remember catching the flight to Los Angeles. And like there was like flying was just like all of these things were just I felt like a little kid. I was like trying everything for the first time,
Mm.
and it's stuff that the mentors and like my counselors helped me with. I had to put it into practice, and standing on a sound stage with Steven Spielberg in Los Angeles. I don't know what I'm doing, and I started learning how to wing it, and looking like I knew what I was doing,
Hmm.
and because like what did I have to lose, and so. The next movie we did was Babe, which is the
Yeah.
talking pig, which we
Yeah.
got an Academy Award for, and that was filmed in Australia. And I moved to America after that. So um, I I still was a little jumpy. There was times I can remember being on the beach in California and hearing like it could have been someone jogging or someone like a
Mhm.
kid running for a bus, and I'd hear footsteps behind me. That was the thing that lingered for me.
Mm.
Obviously I'm flying around the world and I'm working now, and I kind of got out and over it. But my nervous system would still get very jumpy if I heard footsteps behind me.
Wow.
And I could be on the beach, beautiful sunny day with my friends, and I'd go, and for a good 10 years, I think that carried on. And eventually that stopped as well. And I did a lot of meditation, a lot of writing. And I in between movies, I was volunteering, with all kinds of treatment centers and people. And that's kind of where I kind of really started becoming a coach and a counselor in between movie projects. So,
Wow.
but I would say in the last 10 years, my understanding has changed completely of all of it. So that's really where I think the healing has really come. Like, I think up until that point, I'd kind of learned how to cope with it. I
Hmm.
was making the best of it all the time. I think what happened is, one of the common experiences of PTSD is hypervigilance. We get very vigilant about, for some people, it's certain sounds, could be smells, certain people, depending on the, location or the circumstance of the trauma. So for me, it was footsteps. That's what would freak me out.
Hmm.
And so I learned a lot of coping skills and lots of tools and techniques for that. And that's what I would share with my clients. And then about 10 years ago, I came across a new paradigm in psychology, um, which I'm now a practitioner of. And the basis of this idea is that we can never be broken. No matter what we've been through, we can't be broken. That spirit, that soul. And I think that's when I started understanding this dichotomy of, was I outside of myself? Was I inside myself? And now
Hmm.
I kind of think it's all true because we live in a thought created spiritual world,
Hmm.
really. And so that quiet voice inside of me that felt safe, even though I could feel like I was being battered, that's the part of me that can never be broken. And that's what I share with my clients now, no matter what
Wow.
they've been through. And so what I started seeing is that if you go back into the past, which is what a lot of the therapy and the counseling I was getting for those years, if you go back into the past from a low mood, it's a disaster, right? Like I said, I'm crying, you're crying. I could have the whole audience crying right now if I were miserable telling this story.
Hmm.
But because I'm thank God, in a better mood now, or a better state of mind, a better state of consciousness, I can tell you absolute details about what happened, and it doesn't have to affect me because it's not happening right now. And it's not just because it's 30, 40 years ago. It's because even if it happened yesterday, it's not happening now. In this moment, I'm actually safe. I'm okay. And that's what I share with my clients now is that we're only ever feeling our thinking. So when I remember what happened to me when I was miserable, I was feeling the miserable thinking about what happened. And now when I think about what happened, I'm feeling it from a understanding, even compassion for myself,
Hmm.
and even for the men that hurt me. Like it wasn't personal. They didn't know me, which I know is different. Everybody's situations are different. These guys didn't know me. It was very random. But, and I'm going to say something which might sound a bit weird, but I think they were doing the best they could with the thinking they had in that moment. And it's not an excuse.
Hmm.
I see that as an explanation because what the earth was going on in their heads that they thought it was okay to attack a woman, on the street or in a club. Their thinking was so, I don't know, I don't want to curse, but like in the toilet, right?
Right.
That made sense to them. They could do that. Now, that's why I've never been angry or resentful at them because they that's the best they could do with their really low mood basement kind of thinking.
Hmm.
And so I saw that that's true for everybody. So when I'm remembering what happened, if I'm remembering it and the way I innocently tried to help myself when I didn't understand what was happening and I just kept listening to the stories over and over again, I suffered from listening to the stories over and over again. So it was actually replaying in my head. I'm actually quite safe where I am. So that's what I help my clients with. And I work with people with all kinds of chronic pain as well, because what happened for me is I think because I was living in the feeling of this stress all the time,
Hmm.
this hypervigilance, my body started screaming at me. I had chronic back pain for 25 years. I had IBS. My neck and shoulders were always tense. And when I would go to a chiropractor or osteopath, they say, oh, and I tell them my medical history, they go, well, because where your neck was broken, that's where the nerves for your arm come. No wonder your arm is numb. I'm like, okay, because I'm not a doctor. How did I know? But I see now that it was the tension of listening to that, reliving and reliving that those terrible events,
Mm.
kept my body so tense with all the adrenaline, the cortisol, and all that stuff, that my body was screaming at me. So when I started to understand how the mind works, like when I came across these ideas 10 years ago, my pain just went away. I have not had back pain in 10 years.
Wow.
After 25 years I had a monthly chiropractic appointment for 25 years. I was paralyzed and rushed to the hospital on several occasions for movie sets. And now my back is strong. The IBS, the allergies, the asthma, my tension in my neck, all gone. So,
That's
it,
unbelievable. And it actually, thank you again for sharing that. That was a lot of information that I think a lot
mhm,
of people can take
mhm,
because there's a lot of things I just kind of wanted to cover really quickly here is that, first of all, speaking on just what you just recently talked about with the chronic pain, I personally, on a personal note, I've had hand issues. I play guitar for a living, and when I'm going through high amounts of stress in my life, I develop chronic pains, whether it's trigger finger, I mean, you name it. There's all these different things that they call it, but I'm
mhm,
starting to see it as all tension. And there's a doctor that he just recently passed. His name is Dr. Sarno. I don't know if you've
oh
heard
yeah,
of him.
oh
And
definitely, yeah.
yeah, and he would talk about tension, and I think
Mhm.
he called it TMS, tension myositis syndrome, or yeah, I forget the name
Yeah,
of it.
tension myoneural syndrome. Yeah.
That okay, there it is. And he would talk about the internal rage that we have we hold within ourselves if we're holding on to traumas, and we would just get angry, and that rage had nowhere to go, and it would just tense us up. He would also show X-rays of two individuals. One, you could have individual A and B, and A, their spinal column or spinal x-rays showed severe arthritis, and B had a little bit of arthritis, but for some reason B was in more chronic pain than A, and A didn't have any pain, and yet they had
Right.
all this sort of arthritis. And it kind of gave this whole different outlook on what arthritis isn't really the pain, it's the tension is the pain, or the wherever the pain is coming from. So it gets really in depth, and it can be hard to understand. But when you start to kind of deal with it yourself, and it sounds like you've gone through a lot of healing, and it sounds like you're now helping others with that, and that's beautiful. I hope that that's the future, that we can start looking at chronic pain and chronic illnesses in a different light, because I think so much of what we do is self-inflicted. It's stuff that we're doing to ourselves. Not purposely,
Yes,
obviously.
but I would, that's why I use the word innocent.
Mm,
'Cause I innocently self-inflicted because, I think for most people, the trauma, I mean, obviously there are some situations where it's ongoing, but the trauma itself, when we go through these violent situations, they last for a very minimal amount of time. It felt like 10 minutes when I was going through it, but like it probably was only like, say, 2, 3 minutes tops. But the innocent reliving of it afterwards is what I think a lot of people, that's where a lot of the suffering actually comes from not understanding ourselves, from like the expectation of our family or friends are going to treat us a certain, like it's not, confusion, so much confusion and the anger. And I was so angry. Like, why did this happen to me? It's not fair and all that kind of stuff.
hmm
But I'm a big fan of Dr. Sarno in terms of his medical explanation. I really appreciate his medical because the way he explained it is that when you're in that kind of tension, the blood isn't flowing properly. So if the pain and the pain is real. I used to feel like my somebody had hit my pelvis with a baseball bat. My
mm,
lower back was I actually had 3 herniated discs from when they slammed me on the ground. But and doctors and chiropractors always tell me, oh well, that's why, and also I have one leg longer than the other, so which makes my pelvis slightly slanted, and I've got these so
hmm
that's why they would explain the pain. But I still have one leg slightly longer than the other. My pelvis is still slightly slanted, and I don't have any pain now, right?
Right. That's right.
So where I differ with Dr. Sarno is I take like his medical ideas and go a little bit further upstream. And the
Okay.
teachers I have now are like guided me in this certain. So I don't want to claim that this is my ideas, but what I learned from my teachers now, putting this together with like Sarno and what I understand about the mind-body connection, is it's not that the trauma is held in the body, because forgive my British sarcasm, but I'd say like, is that in my elbow? Is it in my lungs? What do you mean it's held in the body?
Right.
Right? When you ask people enough questions when they talk about it being held in the body, what they're really talking about is sensations that are coming with memories. And I always ask people, when you get stressed, where do you feel it? Some people go like this, they'll touch their throat. Some people, it's their chest. Some people, it's their stomach.
hmm
I always had it in the back of my head. I'd be driving around Los Angeles, right, rubbing the back of my head and driving with because I was this tension in my neck and shoulders.
Wow.
And I thought this must be coming from my broken neck. But I understand now, like I said, I see that my body was screaming at me. I see these physical things now as signals, like alarm systems.
hmm
And it's actually wisdom. There's a lot of wisdom in how we're made, right? You know how our bodies are made with such wisdom to heal a fracture or a cut, you know, heal from a cold or a pneumonia, things like that. Well, why wouldn't our minds be made with the same intelligence to heal? They
hmm
are. And so this is what I've learned, that when we're living in this thought created world, and say maybe that thought created world is full of painful memories, and the tension is coming in my body, then the signal is it's trying to alert me to come back to the moment where I'm safe. Because either I'm living in the feeling of my thinking or I'm present in my life. And I innocently didn't understand this before. And now that I do, I can still get, a little tweak of pain in my back, because it's, life things happen. I can
Right.
still get some, tension in my shoulders. But as soon as I do, it's like a little alarm system. It's no different to when you're hungry and your tummy rumbles. It doesn't mean you're dying. It's not a conspiracy, right?
hmm
It's
Right.
right. It's just information. You need
Right.
to eat something, or if you're hot,
hmm
you're tired. Our bodies are full of this wisdom to communicate with us so that we can survive. Well, I see now that when my back was killing me, that sciatica pain was shooting down my legs, or I'm waking up with my arm numb and my head's full of tension. It was actually an alarm signal saying you're spending too much time up in your head worrying. Come back to the moment where you're safe. And I think that's why my pain went away, because when I started to understand how this all works, the insights I was getting was like, oh, yeah. Because thought is always moving.
Right.
Every thought we've ever had has moved. Even scary thoughts, trauma thoughts, everything has moved on. So all those tools and techniques I was using were kind of like messing with the system now. That's why I stress innocently, because I didn't know any better. But if you think of thoughts like trains going through Grand Central Station, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
So any technique I was using was like dragging the train back into the station to try and work out how to make it leave. Well, it already left, right?
Right, right.
Right? So that's why all that writing and meditation stuff, I was trying to fix something that wasn't broken.
Mm,
I started seeing there's nothing wrong with me other than an innocent misunderstanding. So that's what I share with my clients now is that there's nothing wrong with them. They're not broken. They might have suffered, gone through hell, but when you understand that that thinking actually never gets stuck, it might repeat for sure, but it's just flowing through, and we can be the observer of that thinking. You are not your thinking. I thought I was my story. I was
hmm
the girl who was mugged 3 times. So when that woman said that to me, that's why it was so threatening, because if I let go of that, then who am I?
Right,
Right?
right.
It's very scary to let go of some of that stuff. But I I'd gotten so sick of it that I got to the point where I was ready to let go. And then I had this amazing movie career, and I'm flying around the world, and now I write books and I do retreats and do conferences. It's like
It's amazing.
I had no idea. And there I was hanging on to my traumas thinking, this defines me. This is who I am. Don't take this away from
Yeah.
me.
This is really powerful stuff for a lot of people out there listening, right? I mean, the biggest thing I had a couple things that came to me. I love Eckhart Tolle, for instance, and he comes out and sometimes he'll be talking. You could tell that he's letting everything empty out. Like it's like he's not letting any, he's almost like in a conscious meditation, but in a very, very healthy way. And then he just
Yeah.
speaks. And you go, wow, he's let go of a lot of those things. So it's the same concept, but you're a little bit more uh sometimes I look at him and I'm like, I don't know if I could function that way because I need to be grounded to a point because I've got children and I've got, I'm sure he figures out a way to do that. But I just sometimes, but I am someone who's always stuck in my mind. Not really necessarily um, going over traumas from the past, but it's always worry.
Yeah.
It's unhealthy worry. It's things that, aren't even in my present moment. And, interesting. I hope you're okay with me sharing this, but when we came on today, just before the show started, you're in Jerusalem, I believe,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there was like a
Siren.
siren that went off, and you're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, you weren't really late, but you're just letting me know this is what happened. You had to go to the bomb shelter or whatever was going on." And you said it in
Yeah.
such in almost in a not a I want to say a nonchalant way, a way of a kind of calmness was about you. And I was like, holy smokes, I don't know if I'd be good to just jump on them, but some of it is probably a mix of you being used to that, unfortunately, where you are. But at the same time, this is probably something that you've worked through with having past traumas. You're not going to put yourself in that place. Would you be able to share a little bit of that? Is that what you do in moments like that? So, like for other people, if they're going through things
Yeah.
currently, how do they don't get caught up in that?
Yeah, because when you said to me, did it carry on? I mean, I've lived in Israel now for 15 years. And the first year I was here, I was on a bus that exploded. And I don't usually add that in my list of traumas because I wasn't traumatized by it. And this is where I think the difference. Now, luckily, it wasn't a terrorist attack, but I think either the engine blew or the tire blew, but we were going at 70 miles an hour on the freeway. So the bus tipped. It was late at night, smoke, and luckily the driver was amazing. He managed to get the bus over to the side of the road and nobody was hurt. But at the time, everybody was screaming and fighting to get off the bus because, where we live, these things happen and it's tragic.
Mm.
Um, it never occurred to me never to go on a bus ever again. It never occurred. I mean, I was pretty exhausted the next couple of days because the amount of adrenaline and it was a frightening experience. But after a couple of days, it was over, right?
Mm.
My body recovered, my thinking settled. So um, I see now that the reason that only took me a couple of days to get over, as opposed to 10 years of those other ones, was my understanding changed, right? Now, I'm not dismissing, like when the siren goes off here, I bet my blood pressure goes up a little bit. I think it
Mhm.
would be weird if I wasn't affected by it. So I'm not saying it's like, oh, there's the siren, like, oh. It's not like going to a, because sometimes, people do get hurt by things falling and, the rockets do get through sometimes. Um, and my bedroom, which is behind this wall, is concrete safe, and we have metal shutters on the outside of my bedroom window, and I have to shut the shutters, and we stay in there until the siren goes quiet, and then you're supposed to wait 10 minutes until any shrapnel's fallen. And then we come out and you feed the cat and you do a podcast and
Right.
do your shopping and you get on with it because um it's part of like a way of life here. And I'm not saying everybody's like that because obviously some people get more affected than others. But that's really, I think, to me, the most interesting point is that we all are living in our own thought created realities. So if you think something is terrifying, it will be terrifying, no matter what the actual circumstances are. Because when the war started here, a year and a half ago, I had a lot of messages of, I hope you're safe. I hope you're okay. Like lots of wonderful supportive messages. And then I had a couple of people who emailed me and said, I'm so scared for you. I can't sleep. And I'm like, how does that help me? Right?
Right.
Now I'm going to worry about you. You're sitting on your sofa in Florida, nice and safe, and now you're not sleeping because you're worried about me. And that used to happen when I lived in LA. My mother would like hear there was an earthquake, on the news when she's sitting in safety in London, and she would message me, "Are you okay?" I'm like, she'd probably hear about the earthquake before I did because it was 50 miles away and it didn't affect me. You know?
Right.
So, like I said, we're always living in the feeling of our thought created world.
Hmm.
Safety is a state of mind. And it's got nothing to do with time because I've met people who, were in terrible experiences 50, 60, 70 years ago, and they're still living it like it's happening now.
Hmm.
Right. And then there are other people, it happened yesterday and we're getting on with it. What's the difference? The difference is how we're processing, or the meaning we're making out of it.
Right.
So that's where I started, I think, getting my strength is I'm the one who's making meaning out of it. I get to do that. I'm not the victim of anything here. I can make meaning out of it how I want. And so I started to see that my thinking isn't me, and I can be the observer of it. And as far as it getting stuck, I came up with an analogy. See if this helps. Because people say, no, no, my thinking's different. I have repetitive thinking. And I say, it's still thinking going through. And they go, no, mine's maladaptive repetitive thinking. You can call it whatever you want. It's
Right.
still thought. It's spiritual energy.
Mm.
I have no idea what I'm saying right now, but thought is some kind of spiritual energy that travels through our minds, and it's a gift that we've been given to understand life. So I'm sure people listening are familiar with the TV show Friends, right? I'm by no means a Friends um, freak, but I just use this because most people know the show, right?
Right.
The very first episode, I was living in Los Angeles, and I remember the first episode. It was on NBC on a Thursday evening, and the first episode, remember they're sitting in the coffee shop, and Ross says, "I want to be married again," and Rachel runs in her wedding dress. Everybody laughs, ha ha ha, right? And then Chandler says, "I want $1 million," and nothing happens. Everybody laughs.
Yeah.
Now, that episode was on NBC the first time. It was probably repeated on Fox, like a year later, maybe, right? And then you could have maybe seen it on VHS. Remember big chunky VHS
Hmm.
cassettes, right? Then we might have seen it on DVD. You might have seen it on Netflix. You might see it on YouTube. You could probably stream it anytime now. So over the years, the technology's changed. The episode hasn't changed. They haven't re-recorded it. The technology's changed and we've changed. So when we get repetitive thoughts, it might be the same content, but the content is in a fresh new thought going through your mind. Think of it like traffic, like a river,
Hmm.
like clouds are the best analogy for thinking because clouds move through the sky whether we want them to or not. Thinking actually isn't the enemy. It's just a mechanism by which we experience life. And so, and thought, if we want to get really deep about it, thought is actually neutral. It's our reaction to the thinking that creates the experience. So
Mm.
like you probably have other repetitive thoughts that don't bother you, like what's for dinner and walk the dog, and the kid
Right.
needs diapers need changing again. And you probably had that thought multiple times a day, but it doesn't register with you that it's a problem. So it's the reaction to it. Like one of the
Mm.
examples I would use is, we all get like a song stuck in our head sometimes. And as a musician, I'm sure you've had that. You have to play it over
Right.
and over
That's
again,
right.
right?
Yes.
So for me, it's usually something like a 70s, pop song, like an ABBA song or something gets stuck in my head. If I sing along with it, it's going to keep staying in my head.
Mm.
How do you get out of a song that's repeating in your head? Just don't join in and it
Right.
fades away,
Or
right? You
or
don't join
or
in and it fades away,
or change the song.
right?
Do you change your
Either
thought
way,
process or right?
yeah,
Hmm.
and it's moved through and it's not you and you don't have to suffer.
I really love what you said. It's the first time I've ever heard this. Is the idea that that thought, um, it's the same thought. And if it's not benefiting you any longer, you've already done that thought. You've
Yeah.
already had that thought. You've already had that feeling, and you can let it go. And probably what happens with a lot of people is there's a security blanket around that.
Hmm.
I'm holding on to this because this is my identity. This is who I am. I'm not going to let go of that thought. It's scary. And it's weird to think that we are scared to let go of a thought that is not serving us.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's it's a strange uh
Yeah.
it's kind of
It's,
contradicting, but it's something
yeah.
that we do. And I think that that's the
Because
first
it's
place.
familiar.
Hmm.
It's familiar.
Yeah.
I think that's why I talk to a lot of people with health anxiety and anxiety, all kinds of depression and mental health issues. And I find a lot of us are really good at sabotage. Offer some a way out. Well, I'm offering a different understanding of this right now. And so people say, no, 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 that's not going to work for me. I'm like, well, it's how it works for everybody, actually. Right? And as far as letting thoughts go by, they're going to go by anyway. It's like, oh, I'll let that cloud go by. Does the cloud care whether you want to let it go by? The cloud's moving anyway. Like those black ones.
Hmm.
I don't want the black ones. Good luck organizing the clouds, right? That's
Hmm.
why it's such a good analogy because your thoughts are going to go through anyway. They're spiritual energy, and the nature of energy is to keep moving. Energy is
Right.
always moving. So the spiritual energy is going through our minds, and the sensation of it being stuck, or the feeling of it being stuck or repeating, is just my reaction to it. And like a stray cat, if you keep feeding a stray cat, it's going to keep coming back, like
Hmm.
like the song stuck in your head, right? But once I mean, this is the way I see it now. You think of like say you were in the kitchen and you touch something hot, like the hot plate. You wouldn't think, what was that podcast I was listening to where they told you how to take your hand out of a flame? No, you would take your hand out straight away, right? When you understand that if you leave it there any longer, you're going to wait for the smell of burning flesh to take your hand out, right? So
Right.
sadly,
Yeah.
that's only a few people in the world, right? So, right, right. So it becomes automatic to take your hand out of something that hurts. So that's why I think my back and my stomach and my skin and everything hasn't hurt for the last 10 years. It's because it wouldn't make sense to me to hang out there anymore.
Mm.
Now, that doesn't mean I don't have a funky thought sometimes because I do, right? I
Right.
can I can get my feelings hurt. I can still feel guilty. I'm a human being. But now instead of like using that example of being hungry, like if you feel a bit hungry, go eat something. If you've been hungry for like 3 or 4 days, that's a serious problem, right? So why not pick up on the signal earlier? And then I don't have to go into the pain so much. That's why my back, even if it hurts a tiny bit, it's like a little tap on the shoulder. Probably got up in my head a little bit. Maybe I had some hurt feelings or something. Come back to the moment. There's no work to be done because the awareness is sufficient, you know, to
So,
pop out of it. It's amazing.
so your awareness, are you at a point now where you're aware of the thoughts that go through you more than you were? Is
Well,
that kind of what it's about around? Or because obviously these things are happening in a day to day, right? Like
yeah,
you could work on yourself and remove those thoughts and then get in a car and go for a car ride and someone cuts you off and you're like, of course, everyone always cuts me like and then now you're back in that, right? So it's like so how do you let those things go quickly? Does it get better as you work on that?
yes. So it's definitely gotten better, and it's not so much about working on it because that would be something to do.
Hmm.
I would say insight is way more powerful. And this ideas I'm describing, it has a name, it's called the three principles, right? So the three principles understanding would say that the more I get involved in the content of the thinking, the harder it's going to be. As you step back and become an observer, I do not monitor my thinking all day long. I don't want to monitor any of my thinking. But what I'm gotten very aware of is if say my back starts hurting or I start feeling my thinking speeding up, it's more the sensations that come along. They're my clues
Mm.
that I'm off track or I'm about to fall off the cliff, right? I don't actually need to know what the thinking was. It's usually pretty obvious, because when I calm down, I'm like, oh yeah, so and so hurt my feelings, and that's why I was jealous or I was guilty or something, right? But I don't need to know. All I need to know is that the sensation of speeded up thinking, because what anxiety and worry usually feel speeded up. Another one is a sense of urgency. I know when I have a sense of urgency now, that's usually I'm off in my thinking a little bit. For some people, it's the debate in the head. Should I can't make a decision, right?
Hmm.
It's not about the content of the decision. It's the fact that I'm conversation for one. If I'm having a conversation for one, then that's my clue. I remember I was saying about how the pain is like an alarm system.
Hmm.
So these other things, and for me, it's like losing my sense of humor. When I start going downhill with my mood, I lose my sense of humor. I might get a bit sarcastic. I get very serious. Those are my clues now to catch myself so that I don't have to go so far down the hill that my back is killing me.
Mm. Okay, so you get the signal. Okay,
Mhm.
you get the signal. You're aware something's off. I'll call them, let's just for, argument's sake, call them stress signals, whether it's a
Yeah,
back pain, a skin
yeah,
outbreak, whatever.
yeah.
Then do you go to the awareness of what is going on around me? Like, what am I thinking about? Do you come in and let it
Rarely.
go? So how do you then move past that? Like, that's where I'm a little bit confused, and I don't know
Yeah.
if the audience is
Well,
thinking that at all, but
I mean, that's the work I do with my clients, and
okay, okay.
and
So,
we're
but
welcome to have another session. But
yeah, I love
but
that. Okay, so you get
but
so you get the
it really,
signal. Hmm.
yeah. Um, I'll give you an example of where that happened.
Okay.
So, a couple of years, no, it was just after COVID. So we'd been locked up for 2 years, right? And then I got invited to speak at a conference in London. And I was so excited to go just to get out of the house, to get on go somewhere. And the night before the flight, I was at a graduation of one of my clients had I met her in a mental hospital and now she's graduating college. Of course, I had to go to her graduation.
Mm.
I tripped on the way out, fell and cracked a rib. So I'm now the next day having to fly across Europe with a cracked rib. So, and
Wow.
remember how the airports were absolutely jam-packed after COVID and like everybody's trying to get somewhere. I can't breathe deeply and trying to drag suitcases. It was miserable. So I'm now going for like 4 or 5 days in London. I and the first day of the conference was on my birthday. And I dropped a hint to a few of the organizers that it was my birthday. Nobody remembered, right?
Oh.
So I can't breathe. I'm in pain. I do this great talk, but like then everybody forgot my birthday. I couldn't go shopping. I couldn't do any of the tourist things I'd planned. I got home and I'm literally sitting on my sofa here. It was June, so it was like 100 degrees outside. And I'm sitting there miserable because I'm going over in my head all the things that weren't fair, shouldn't have happened. Why did it wasn't fair. It was my birthday. Blah, 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 blah. And then I suddenly caught myself. I don't know if you've ever seen this cartoon. There's a cartoon of a man sitting on a park bench, and the rain is just coming on him, and everybody else is in the sunshine.
Right, right. Yeah.
That's what I was like, I was manufacturing this horrible, yucky feeling, and yet the beautiful blue sky, I'm home, I'm safe. And as soon as I caught myself, it literally popped. I didn't have to do anything because the ridiculousness of what I was doing to
Mm.
myself
Right.
popped me out of it. Like when you touch the hot flame, you don't think, I'm sure there's a technique that I learned sometime to help me get to safety. No, why would you keep doing something when you really, really, really see that it's hurting you?
Right.
So listening to that repeated the stories that we tell ourselves, constantly going back into the past, going back over things that are miserable, or worrying about the future, catastrophizing about future stuff.
Mm.
Like one of my favorite quotes is Mark Twain. And he said, I've been through some terrible things in my life, and some of them actually happened.
Yeah, right. I like that.
Well, Mark Twain, right? Some of
Yeah,
them actually have, right? Because we live through these like traumas and most of it's never happened or didn't happen that way.
right.
But I'm living in the feeling of that. And
Hmm.
now I know I don't have to. Doesn't
Wow.
mean it didn't happen, doesn't mean
Hmm.
it didn't hurt. We're not in denial here. I just don't have to be the victim by living in it today.
And I've said, I believe two of my key things that I've always tried to work on, I tell people to work on is forgiveness and awareness.
Mhm.
I think both of them can work hand in hand really well. Awareness is huge. So what you're saying is you get these signals, then there's the awareness, and then obviously you mentioned that you do work with individuals, and I I don't think we all work the same way. I think there's some differences, and you probably see that in some of the clients you work with, that there's some different things that people might have to try to kind of get out of those cycles. I don't know. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I would assume just from the people I work with, even with music students or with just coaching clients, it's they all kind of come with a different package, and you have to kind of unwrap that package a little bit to see where you're kind of starting from. So if people are, this has been amazing. Like you're giving so much great information. If people are interested in the work you do you have a website or anything where people can contact you? I'm just curious how people get in contact with you.
Yeah. So I have a two websites. One is my name, hannahstudley.com, and you can contact me through that website. I have information on there about coaching. I do one-on-one coaching. I'm just about to launch a online course about chronic pain,
Oh,
a
wow.
6-hour course. I've just recorded it. So in the next, hopefully by the end of this month, or the next month, I should say, it should be up and working. My other website is called Beyond Diagnosis. There's a hyphen in the middle, beyond-diagnosis.com. And that's to do with my latest book. I've written 4 books. Um, the first 3 were novels because I find stories are a great way to get this information to people. You know, the characters do the suffering, the falling down. So the first book was all about the traumas that I've described today and how I kind of initially recovered from those. The second book is about the chronic pain journey I went on. The third one's about hormones.
Mm,
It's a Men have hormones too, but it's a kind of a hormone adventure novel. And
right.
then the book I released last year, which is for this other website, I've actually collected over 60 stories, real life stories of people who've recovered from every kind of mental health diagnosis you could mention. Everything from
Mm,
schizophrenia and psychosis to bulimia, OCD, PTSD, CPTSD, and they've recovered by understanding what I've been talking about today. And the book is full of, it's like a textbook. It's full of interviews with medical health professionals, psychiatrists and doctors who also use these understanding in their work, and research papers too. There's a lot of research on this stuff. So it's the understanding is called the 3 principles. And so as a practitioner, I'm presenting this that there are no exceptions. So no matter what someone's been through or suffered, I can probably cite a case study of someone who's gotten well. And when I say well, I mean off medication, not needing treatment anymore, living their best lives. So, and the other thing is I do is, so I've got the books, the website, and I have a membership group. And in the membership group, it's a monthly fee, it's $25, it's nothing. And we have 3 live coaching sessions a week. So in those coaching sessions, we have a book club. I do sometimes a coaching demo. I have special guest speakers. We do Q&As, like I'm doing one in a few hours today, Thursday. So that's another way that you can have a supportive community. And the people in the membership group have, pretty much been through something, whether it's chronic pain or trauma or dealt with something, and we're all there supporting each other. And I'm kind of leading discussions as a supportive community.
you have the hannahstudley.com. I want to
Mhm.
say to everybody as well, there is a silent C in the beginning of that, just in case you're like me and didn't get that at first. And then you said the other website was where this other, because the book that I was interested, even myself personally, is the one with the different stories of people who've gone through different okay, so this is the one here. And what's that one called again?
It's called Beyond Diagnosis.
Beyond Diagnosis. That's great.
The subtitle says a paradigm shift from pathology to, sorry, I can't speak, a paradigm shift from pathology to innate health.
Mm,
Because the basic idea is everybody has innate health. It just got covered up by all the sad, miserable thinking we've all experienced, you know?
This is one of the things that I am felt blessed about doing this show is I get to meet people like you. I get to meet you and get to know you over the course of the hour, but then to find out how you're actually helping other people.
Mhm.
And this happens so often. And then I go, wow, like these are my people. It's like I get so excited by the end of it because it's just that's amazing. And if the fact that you can get different people with different types of diagnosis sharing the same kind of healing through, we are so much more than I think we give ourselves credit for. And we have to start to come in alignment with that. I think we will as we go on. One of the last things I always ask a main question at the end of each episode, and it kind of ties in going way back to when you had your out of body experience a little bit, and maybe the fact of your life experience. Let's talk more about that, like in regards to all the things you've gone through. The main question I always ask everyone, it's a pretty deep one, and maybe you've never contemplated, or maybe you have. But the real question is, when you look at us as a whole, as you over there, I'm here, everyone's doing their thing in this world. If you were to say if there's a theme or a reason as to why we come here and do this work we do on Earth, what do you see as the purpose of everything we're doing?
Um,
It's a tough one. It's a big one.
I everything thoughts go into my head. I think, no, that's not really true. Because what came into my head was to heal, but that implies that there's something wrong.
Mm,
I think maybe a better way of saying it is to come home.
mm,
Because a lot of what I now understand and point my hopefully myself and the people I help to is to come back to something. Because all those years, especially in when I was in California, I was encouraged to do this like meditation, this writing, and like, work on yourselves. And it kind of implied that my well-being was kind of over there. And if I just meditated a bit more, if I just wrote a bit more, if I got a bit more honest, or I did more charity work or something, then I would get to my well-being and it's over there.
mm,
And I see now that was an innocent misunderstanding because it's not over there, it's here. And we already have it. Like I said about not being broken, we can't be broken because spirits are in the world of the formless. Bodies do get damaged, bodies can get sick, bodies can get broken, but they're in the world of form. The world of
mm,
form is an illusion, right? And we fall for this illusion, and the illusion, involves getting jobs and careers and houses and cars and oh, you've got to get, and even get well-being, get resilience. No, well-being and resilience are innate. They're who we really are. So it was like I think we're born perfect. We're born with this, and when I don't assume bodies, I'm talking about us, the spirit, this essence, is whole and beautiful and perfect. And then we have all these life experiences, which then like covers it up. Lots of schmutz, right? Covering it up. And whether it's life events like traumas and losses and grief and stuff like that, or whether it's old ideas, things that we're told, things that we believe, and it's covering up. So like the work I do and my colleagues are doing, we're just kind of helping people see that that's all in the world of illusion, and it starts to melt away. And that's why I don't actually have to work on myself. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to get anywhere anymore. Because like my favorite analogy is a snow globe, right? All that work and trauma and everything was like shaking up the snow globe, right?
mm-hmm.
And the snow globe is such a great analogy because all that swirling around, it's very hard to think straight and be, but what did I do to make the snow globe settle?
You had to shake it. Oh,
Well,
to make it settle, you just had to let it
yeah,
sit, right?
yeah, right? I
Right.
stopped shaking it, right?
Mm,
And then there's clarity. And in the clarity, that's why I don't dish out advice anymore to my clients. I don't need to because when their thinking settles, they know what to do. They know
mm.
what they're supposed to be. They know what their life's mission is. I don't have to tell them, right? It was only when my thinking was going 100 miles an hour and all mixed up. But all the mixed up stuff is in the world of the illusion. It was just covering up that beautiful spirit, that soul that we really are.
I love that. I love the way you described it, that we're right here, right
Yeah,
now. We're not
yeah.
somewhere down the right. And
Right.
And that can get mixed in because I am also a believer in meditation to a point. I use music as my meditation. But it's more about the stillness and the calmness and finding our stillness and calmness and finding who we truly are in essence.
'Cause I
And
bet when you're doing music and you're in the zone, you
hmm
just are. Like an athlete, like Michael Jordan could just, he knew where the ball was. He didn't even have to look, right?
right.
When you're in the zone, like as an artist, an athlete, and so I pretty much, I'm not living there all the time. I'm not perfect, but
hmm
I know it's possible. And
hmm
so I relax and don't panic. And then I usually come back to it.
This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for being on. I never know which direction it's going to go. And then when I'm talking to people, I feel like I could spend another 6 hours with them. I say it all the time, and it's not because I feel that I'm just saying it. I actually feel that way, and I get there. I want to encourage anyone that's listened to this and enjoyed Hannah's experiences and the work that she's doing to please check out her website and her books. Obviously, we'll have those shared in the description. And I always turn to my audience and say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe to The Soul Inspired so we can get amazing, beautiful guests like Hannah on. And I do want to thank you again, Hannah, for coming on and sharing your wisdom with everybody. I really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
So